Hello, everybody. This is Andy Menon from RPA Vanguard. Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of the UiPath Apps File Picker and Storage Buckets video series. Before I begin with the second part, I wanted to go back to the vanilla implementation that we created in the first video and take a closer look at how the application behaves in its most basic state. I'm in the storage bucket that I created for the purposes of this demo. And I want to confirm that the file that I want to upload to the storage bucket already exists. What I want to do is I want to go back to my vanilla application and upload the same file once more. Good. The file has been uploaded. There is no indication of whether or not the file I want to upload already exists in the repository, and the file upload has successfully completed without any complaints. So if I go back to the repository and if I refresh this file, right, it was replaced with the latest file that I just uploaded. Now this is by design. So I'm going to close this out, go back to my app, and this is the design view of the vanilla app. Get into the events of the upload file button, and I'm going to make a small change in the step upload file to storage bucket. I'm going to click the auto generate name option. Observe that as soon as I do that, the file name that we specifically created for this reason is not valid anymore. So what the app does is automatically generate a file name for you. So we save this, preview. I upload the file again. Observe that this time the file has been uploaded with a unique GUID attached to it. There is a unique identifier. So getting back into the buckets, if I refresh, I have a file with a completely new and unique name. The original file is still retained alongside a copy of that file with a unique name. So with that, I want to take a look at the current state of how the file picker storage bucket mechanism works, and what are the considerations that we have to keep in mind if we are going to be building a practical application. So what I've done here is I have prepared a whiteboard because it's easier for me to explain this in a schematic as opposed to explaining it directly in the app designer. So let us say that I have 3 repositories. If I want to upload the files, I first have to decide what kind of a file I'm trying to upload. So first I make the determination that this file is a PDF file, let's say. Then I decide if I want to replace the existing file or if I want to overwrite the existing file. If I want to replace the existing file, what I do is if I look at this step closely, this is pretty much the step that we discussed in the first video. We provide the upload file to storage step with the file picker upload. We give it the name of the repository and the file name, and we upload. And one of the key observations is that the auto generate name flag is disabled. It is not checked. Now, in case you want to retain the existing file and do not want to replace it, you go the other way. You add another step, another rule, upload file to storage bucket, but this time what you will be doing is you will be enabling the auto generate name option. This is really handy because just as you saw, simply enabling this flag will upload the file in a completely unique and a different file name. This is good. So at the minimum, you have to create 2 steps to handle files for a single repository or a single storage bucket. Now, this is for one repository, just the PDF repository. I have 3 of them here. which means that if I have to give my users the option to replace the file or save the file with a new name, I have to create 6 separate steps. And the amount of work I have to do only increases if I have more number of repositories in addition to the 3 I have, right? So this is the current state or the current capability of the UiPath file picker and storage bucket integration. So let's take a closer look at what those current capabilities are. First, this storage bucket binding is rigid. It's very rigid. What I mean by that is I cannot put the name of the repositories into variables. I can't have programmable logic that helps me set the name of the buckets into variables, right? And then finally, you would bring that down to one single upload file to storage bucket where you would provide this variable as the name of the bucket. Now you cannot do that in this rule. You cannot do that in upload file to storage bucket. It is rigid. Therefore, you have to have 2 separate steps. That's reason number 1. The second reason is the auto generate name option really cannot be parameterized by binding it to any kind of variable. If you want to save the file 2 different ways, you have to have 2 different steps, just like I showed here. Now comes the third and the most important one. There is no straight option to warn the user that they are about to replace an existing file, regardless of how you build it. Even if you give the option to the user to replace a file or save it with a new name, there is no way to warn the user that they're about to replace an existing file. So how do we address these limitations given the current state of the UiPath file picker and storage bucket capabilities? So first, I'm going to start with point number 3 here. Although this is last, I feel that I have to discuss this first because anytime you try to drop a file somewhere, the first thing that pops up in any normal working conditions today is if that file is existing, you get a warning, right? So let's take a look at how we could build that into our app. Okay, so I'm going to click on this link here. It says fetch file from storage bucket. And when I click on this link, it takes me to a very simple form. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my storage bucket and I'm going to pick up the name of this file and go back to this form. And of course, there's a hint here. It says enter known file name. That means you want to look for a file which you think already exists in the repository, or you want to download the file. I'm going to paste that here, and then I'm going to hit. So what you get back is a download URL to that file, right? And if I copy this link and I plug it into my browser, I'm able to download the file, right? So you see how we could use this capability to warn the user about whether or not a file already exists in the storage bucket. So if I try to look for a file, I try to pull it from the repository or the storage bucket. If I get a URL in return, it means that file exists. Similarly, let me now try to change the name of this file and say XYZ. I know that this file does not exist. So I'm going to hit fetch. There, it says the file is not present. That means I've got an error. So keep this in mind because we'll be coming back to this in a few. I'm going to go back to my vanilla implementation and I'm going to drop a file, the same file again, in fact. Observe that unless the user hits upload, the user will not know whether the file is going to be replaced or whether it's going to be uploaded with a new name. And that's because I have made that arrangement in the backend, right? If I have actually enabled this auto generate option in my app, but there's no way for the user to know that in the front end, right? So there is no option. So I'm back to the whiteboard again, and this time we'll focus on the right to see how we could optimize the scenario that we see here on the left. So I'm going to zoom closer and remove this box. As usual, I'm going to be following the same path. I'm going to take a look at what is the kind of file that I need to upload, and then again, a decision-making process on whether I must replace the existing file. If my decision is to replace the existing file, then I assign the file picker's file name, that is the file that's dropped by the user on top of the file picker control, to a variable named var generated file name. So in case I don't want to replace the file, I generate a unique file name. So in other words, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to neutralize the use of the auto generate name. So I'm not going to be using this feature as I did before, because if I use this feature, then I have to have two steps. Instead, I'm going to be using a single step, but I'll be doing some of the work and generating either the default file name or a unique file name before I can invoke the upload to storage bucket action. So in this case, I really do not have to bother about the auto generate name because that work has already been done here. And then I take the var generated file name and pass it to the upload file to storage bucket action. Now you can see how the effort has been drastically reduced from 2 steps per storage bucket down to 1. Of course, the binding of the storage bucket remains rigid because currently there is no solution to this, and it might get better in the future, but we don't know. But what we have done is dramatically reduce the amount of work that we have to do for each of these, right? But this work is done only once. It does not really matter how many repositories or how many storage buckets you have. The decision-making process of replacing an existing file or not to replace an existing file and then generate the file name is done only once. So that way, we have actually optimized the use of the upload file to storage bucket action and made our application that much more efficient and that much more lighter. So what I've done in essence is first, we have already looked at how to address this problem. And also we have tackled the problem of parameterizing the option to save the file either with a unique name or overwrite an existing file. So let's take all of this together and see how it results in a practical file upload application. So I'm back to the main page or the home page of my app. This time I'm going to click on the second link that says practical implementation of file picker and storage bucket. And this is what I've come up with. Here we have the file picker control as usual. Nothing much has changed here, but there are a bunch of options alongside the upload file button. This option in the middle is a slider control and it is on by default. And what it enables the file picker control to do is to check for the file in the storage bucket. So if I go back to the storage bucket, I know that this file already exists here. It's confirmed. I'm going to upload that file again. This time there is a file replacement warning. It is warning the user that the file they're about to upload is about to be replaced, right? It already exists. And if they upload this file, the existing file in the repository is going to be replaced. Now, at this point, the user has 3 options. One is to cancel the upload. The second is to allow the upload to go through, knowing fully well that the file that is already existing in the repository is going to be replaced. Then there's the third option. The user can upload the file with a unique name so that the existing file is not replaced. So for that, if I enable this, you will see this status message change. By default, the status message is showing the name of the file that's been dropped here. So if I click, you can see that it is showing me a stamped file name. That means the file has been assigned a unique stamp before it can be uploaded to the storage bucket. So I'm going to go ahead and upload this file. So I go back into the bucket, and as you can see, there is no file here. I'm going to refresh this page. And here we have the file with a unique signature. Now let's run another test for completeness. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to come back again. Let me disable the check for file in storage bucket, and I'm going to drop this file. And this time you see a check is not made because the user has opted not to check for an existing file before the file upload is performed. So you can see how practical this application has become. And one of the key advantages here is that you are taking the power from the backend, from here, from this part of your application that we covered earlier. You're taking it from this part of the application, the auto generate name, and you're putting it in the hands of the app users. And now it falls on the app users to manage their files responsibly based on their requirements. I'm back in the UiPath app, and this time I'm going to click on a page named Page Demo 2 File Picker Practical. And this is the app that we just saw in action. And here is the file picker control. And what we'll be doing in this section is also quickly take a look at some of the file picker attributes that we are going to be repeatedly using across all of these features of this app. The next is this checkbox. This checkbox is tied to a variable called var is file stamp. So this variable decides if the file has to be given a unique stamp. Next is the slider. The slider again is bound to another variable called var check file in bucket. And if that variable is set to true, a check is performed to see whether the file that was dropped on this bucket actually exists in the storage bucket. Finally, we have the upload file. And if you watched the previous video, we discussed in detail how the file upload control and the upload file button functionalities are built out. So what we have done here in this version of the app is to enhance the functionality of the file picker control and the upload file by taking into consideration the control mechanisms that we have with this checkbox and the slider. So I go into the events and I have the file added rule. So what I'm trying to do here is demonstrate the various attributes of the file picker control and how they could be used in functions and expressions. So basically, what we are going to be using for the file picker control are mainly the following attributes. And if the name of my file picker control is file picker upload, then some of the attributes that are very useful, these are very useful attributes. We have the file picker upload dot name, which is the name of the file, in which case the name of the file would be this. Then there is file picker upload dot file name without extension, which returns just the name of the file. And then Obviously, we have file picker upload dot file type, which is .pdf. So these attributes are very, very useful when writing the business logic of your app. Going back to the app, and here is where I'm actually doing the work to generate a file name depending on whether the user has selected this option. If the user has selected to upload with a unique name, then the file is going to be set with a unique file stamp. Otherwise, the file name is going to be unchanged. And that is the logic that I'm actually creating here. And you saw where that is on this whiteboard. And this is where we are actually deciding whether we are going to generate a unique file name or keep the file name unchanged. So the expression for that is pretty easy. I'm not going to spend time writing the expression here. It is easier to write that in Notepad. I'm going to concat. I'm going to take the file name without extension, and then I'm going to write an inline if condition. If var, the name of that variable is var is file stamp, If that is true, then what we do is we concat the file name without extension with a hyphen, comma, and a GUID, a GUID function. If it is false, if var is file stamp is false, then we just append an empty, close, and then we append the file picker upload file type. So essentially, this is one single condition that actually looks at the var is file stamp option, and then it generates a file name. If var is file stamp is set to true, then the file name that is generated is going to be dash unique ID dot PDF. If not, the file name that's going to be generated is simply the value of the file name and the name of the or the value of the file extension. That's pretty much how we generate the file name and assign it to var generated file name. Next, this is the next step where we decide if the user wants to save the file with the original file name or with a unique file name. And this is the combined condition. Obviously, if you take the bottom condition first, if the file name, if the user has chosen this option here, upload with the unique name, then there is no point in checking if the file exists in the bucket because the user has decided to save the file with a unique name. And the second condition is this var check file in bucket must be set to true. Now this variable is bound to this slider. If this slider is enabled, then the file check in this bucket must be performed. So if both these conditions align, then what we do is we make an attempt to get a download URL for that file from the repository. So in this case, I'm going to be using the get file from storage bucket action, and I'm going to give it the file name. Remember, this file, the var generated file name is at this time based on the previous logic equals the original file name. Now, if it's completed, then a success event happens and the application gets a download URL in return. Now, we don't have to use the download URL for downloading the file here. All we need to do is use that to warn the user, look, I tried to look into the repository, I got the download URL. It means that this file exists. So the file that you're going to be uploading is going to replace an existing file. And this is where we show the user a file replacement warning. Now, if the file does not exist, we don't do anything. And this action actually exits without any errors. Basically, there is no error handling. So I'm going to close this out. And I'm going to take a look at what happens when we click on upload with unique name. So if I edit this rule, here you can see that based on the value of var is file stamp is tied to this checkbox. So here again, you can see that the checkbox is going to generate the file name based on the option given to it. If the checkbox is checked, then a unique file name is generated. If it's unchecked, then the original file name is retained. And this is the same expression that we discussed here that has been assigned into this set values action. Next is the upload file button. This is where most of the action happens. Again, I need to get the var file type. We discussed this in the previous video because the app needs to know which repository or which storage bucket the file needs to be uploaded. So here is the file type. If it's PDF, we then invoke the upload file to storage bucket. And here you see there is only one step which takes us back to our whiteboard. There is only one step for every storage bucket, and the auto generate name option has been permanently disabled. And once the file is uploaded, everything is similar to what we discussed in the previous video. And this is how we could build a very practical application to manage our files using the file picker and storage bucket in UiPath apps. And if you did like this video, please do like and subscribe to my channel so that I'm motivated to keep coming back with more content. Thank you and bye.